Call to order the meeting of the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District Board of Managers, June 9th, 2016. All managers are present. I see no member of the public here. On the agenda, we'll be striking 8.1. That will come back to us at a later date. Is there any other change to the agenda? Anyone wants?
Madam Chair, would you add
Yes.
the investment task force to the board updates?
I certainly will, Manager Becker. Anything else? Is there a motion to approve with those changes?
Second.
A motion by Manager Shackleton, second by Manager Olson. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Under information items, we have a whiskey system implementation update memo. And on the consent agenda, we have only the minutes, approval of the minutes of May 26th. And there is one small change there at line 185. The motion was seconded by Manager Olson. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. President's report. I attended a meeting on June 1st with Long Lake residents who live in Long Lake and Orono. Our staff had done some information gathering and put together a presentation led by Mike Heyman and addressed the attendees. We discussed it briefly in Planning and Policy Committee this afternoon. They are alarmed by the current water condition in Long Lake and are interested in getting together and doing something about that. I'm sure we'll get more coming forward. I also attended the Bowser briefing for the Metropolitan Watershed Districts earlier this week regarding the buffer bill. Becky Christopher was there as well. There was a discussion of the bill as amended and then a discussion of the draft implementation policies that are being prepared for the Board of Water and Soil Resources. There are 7 policies in draft form. The June meeting of Bowser, they will consider those policies and then approve them to be posted for 30-day comment. So anyone who wishes to review them, I have the draft as of earlier this week, but they were working on it as we went along. But they'll be in the Bowser packet, I think, Friday next week, and then of course they'll be posted for comment. So we need to have a discussion, that is a discussion item in an upcoming meeting during that comment period. I don't want to try to summarize 2.5 hours of conversation, but just a few points I wanted to make. Implementation, I don't think begins until November 2017, if I have that right, so it isn't a huge rush. The data that was collected, as you know, the DNR did maps, showed that there were minimal unbuffered areas according to the definitions in the statute. And the amendment in this current legislation brought the responsibility to the soil and water conservation districts. Other LGUs, including watershed districts, can assume jurisdiction if they choose. The MS4 exemption is not straightforward. There is an additional requirement for that exemption, either for riparian protection control policies or projects with water quality benefit, with a lot of details to be spelled out going forward. And then when they're done with the policies, of course, there'll be further layers of implementation, including guidance memos and templates and fact sheets. So, as I say, we'll schedule that for discussion when we have the versions that are posted for comment. The last item I have is that we need to make a decision about whether to meet on June 23rd or June 30th. As you know, the MOD summer tour is on the 23rd. So what is the pleasure of the board?
I plan to attend the summer tour.
Okay. And you're registered as well. Could everyone be here on the 30th, or we just have our meeting then and not the 23rd?
Fine.
Sure.
Okay,
Yes.
we'll do that. We'll do that then.
So no meeting 23rd?
We'll meet, no meeting on the 23rd, we'll meet on the 30th. And I think there's still a few days left to register for the summer tour. The 14th sticks to my mind, though I'm not sure that's absolutely correct. And that is my report. And then Manager Miller, if you'll report on Planning and Policy Committee.
The Planning and Policy Committee meeting met today at 4 o'clock with all the managers present except for Manager Blix. And the was a long and robust discussion about the purpose of the committee and what we hope to accomplish. And there'll be complete minutes for the board meeting, because I won't try to, we're still trying to comprehend all the good information that was given to us. But it's clear that we're going to try to develop some frameworks for making decisions that are more transparent and strategic, and better understanding of long-term implications of those decisions that we do make.
Thank you. I attended the CAC meeting last night. They had 11 members in attendance. They looked at one homeowner project, which was a little early in the cycle because it was work that needed to be done right away. There is a rain garden that would capture all the roof runoff, and some permeable pavers. They recommended approval of that up to the cost, up to the $2,500 limit. There are possible 30 more homeowner projects to be considered in July and August. Staff, Mr. Lochner reported on recent and future events, and also talked about the program evaluation efforts that are underway in the education department in preparation for budget discussions. He also did a little showcase of education resources that had materials out in the hall, and not all of them were there because there was an ongoing Minnetonka Fun Fest over at the community center. But we will later on this year be having an opportunity for the board to walk through the materials that are used in the education department as well. CAC members reported on news articles of interest and talked about the presence of enormous bags of aquatic herbicides in the hardware stores, and also with a sign saying you might need a permit. And also, apparently so. I didn't see the sign, but that's the hardware store. And then one of the members, who's a member of the Diamond Lake, Friends of Diamond Lake, reported on their recent cleanup event. The lake had a lot of goldfish in it, they found out. So, yeah. I think that's an invasive species.
Koi pond.
Diamond Lake.
Yeah, as you say.
Well, I think they were goldfish from aquariums.
How'd they find that out?
Well, they were doing a lake cleanup and they saw goldfish. I didn't ask.
Goldfish and carp are like this.
Yeah.
I know they are, but I think they come from different places. Some come from fish tanks, which is not so good. Quite illegal. I reported them on the schedule, our upcoming budget discussions, and of course reiterated the invitation for them to attend and talk briefly about the Long Lake meeting and that same buffer law briefing that I just spoke of. It was a good meeting. Manager Becker, the Investment Task Force.
Thank you. The Investment Task Force met and scoped out the first objective of the task force is to develop a common understanding among the board members of the opportunities and costs associated with outside funding. So to that end, we decided to prepare a written description of the outside funding opportunities, the criteria to prioritize the programs for application, and a short, mid, and long-term plan to obtain ongoing supplemental funding, seek specific one-time project funding, and identify nonprofit partners. This description will include a written description of funding categories. It'll address the resources required to seek and manage funds and outline the considerations and concerns, as well as identify short-term priorities and address the board's role in seeking funding, including the board's approval function. With that, we agreed to get back to the board with that written description and have a discussion of what our next steps are.
Good. We'll schedule that on the agenda. Are there other reports, other meetings or events that managers would like to report on? Thank you. Then on to the upcoming meeting and event schedule, and we can modify that as we just discussed to strike the committee and board meeting on the 23rd and shift them to the 30th. otherwise, that works. As I said, 8.1 is removed from the agenda, so we're on to 8.2, the annual public hearing of the MCWD Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. Ms. Christopher.
Thank you, Madam Chair, managers. There are 2 items on the agenda tonight related to the district's requirements as an MS4. One is the annual public hearing, and the other is the submittal of our 2015 annual report. As the board knows, the district is considered an MS4 because it is the drainage authority for 8 public drainage systems. And as an MS4, we're required to have a stormwater pollution prevention plan, or SWIP for short. The district's SWIP is included in the packet and outlines how the district is meeting the requirements of the permit, including the 6 required minimum control measures, which are education and outreach, public participation, illicit discharge detection and elimination, construction stormwater runoff control, post-construction stormwater management, and pollution prevention and good housekeeping. The MS4 permit requires that the district hold at least 1 annual public hearing as an opportunity for comment on the district SWIP. This hearing was noticed in the Strib and on the district website, and we've received no comments thus far, and I don't believe there's anyone in the audience for the public hearing. The other item in the packet is the 2015 annual report, which covers our progress towards implementing our SWIP and any changes that have been made to our programming. And this report is due each year on June 30th, and so tonight staff is also requesting authorization to submit that report to the PCA.
First, is there a motion to authorize submission? Manager Shackleton moved. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll take Manager Rogers a second. Are there any questions for Ms. Christopher? Manager Blixt?
I was looking in the report, and maybe this isn't the place I should be looking for, but I'm still waiting for a report on our permit activity in the last year, and I think I know that I've asked for it previously, and I was thinking I would find information in this report, and it's not there. So, and basically I'm trying to get a sense of, in the past we have received the number of permits that have been issued throughout the various cities in the district, and along with the different types of permits that, so just to get it's given me a sense of the types of activity that are occurring throughout the district. Whether it's development, redevelopment, whether it's stormwater, wetland impacts, it just historically has given me an idea of how development or redevelopment is impacting the district. And at one point I knew a lot more about permits because we approved them all, and now I feel very distant from it. And I would at least like to get a report on a regular basis on what's going on.
Sure.
So that I just feel really detached from the whole system, and I would just like to know what's going on.
Sure.
And, with the district land and resources.
Yeah, Manager Blix, managers, you're right, that's not covered in this report. It's basically a template online form, so we just answer what they ask for. But
I figured that part out.
Right, but as far as what's issued by the different cities and what types, there is an information request that we'll be sending out next week. A lot of it's for the comp plan, but we're tying in those questions as well. So we'll be obtaining that information that way. As far as, is that the primary interest, is what other cities are doing, or also our own?
What I asked for before was for last year, for just like a report for the year of what happened in 2015, because I've always gotten, and it seems like the template is there, that you just have to go in and plug it in, the numbers, and so that we can kind of get a sense of what's been going on out there.
Sure.
And James is nodding like
I remember.
He knows.
I know.
Which
I
report
remember. I
I'm
remember you
talking
asking
about.
for it, and I knew you were going to ask
We also had something
again.
scheduled for the retreat on April 7th, and you weren't able to be there, so we
Yeah.
pulled that off the agenda.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Easter.
President White, Manager Blix, managers, yeah, I apologize for that taking longer than it should have. I think when the request was made, the specific genesis for the request was consideration for delegating permitting authority to City of St. Louis Park. And then we sort of digressed into discussions of wanting to know what permits and how many cities with our authority were issuing, what kind of violations that they were running into, and how they're handling those violations. And that's taking a lot longer to gather than you might think it would. While we do have a requirement that annual reports are submitted, they don't come in right on the money, and they don't always contain the information that we need. So, as Becky mentioned, and as a complementary piece to the comp plan, the permitting staff are actively working with those communities to get and compile that information. And it was our goal to bring that back in final form with all the permits that we've issued. That's much easier information to compile and present. The only other thing that I'd say is I agree, the board should probably get a quarterly report to track permits, and that's something that we can do, and I will work on making sure that it happens.
Thank you very much. Other questions of Ms. Christopher regarding the plan submission? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. And then on to the resolution 16055. That was what we just approved.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And so the public hearing is closed. Item 10.2, Resolution 16-056, authorization to contract with Smith Partners for comprehensive plan support. Ms. Christopher.
Thank you. Chair White, managers. Yes, staff is requesting authorization to contract with Smith Partners for assistance with policy analysis as well as plan drafting and review and editing. As has been discussed, we've characterized the work of the comp plan in kind of three general areas, where we've got the internal strategic planning and program evaluation process, the work with the advisory committees to vet and further develop the implementation framework of the plan, and then updating the technical data and resource inventory. And all three of those pieces are moving along as scheduled, and we're now, as staff, kind of turning our focus towards the actual drafting of the plan, and would like to get this assistance from Smith Partners with that. And so staff is proposing to divide the work of drafting and review and editing amongst a team of staff, WANC, which has already been authorized through a contract to do kind of the data volume as well as the water resources section of each sub-watershed plan. And then we'd like to bring on Smith Partners to the team to focus more on policy matters and legal matters, particularly areas like CIP structure, local water plan requirements, procedural requirements. And so we worked with Smith Partners to develop a scope for an amount not to exceed $38,740, which is within the remaining budget that we have for the comprehensive plan. And I am requesting approval this evening of that contract, and I'll take any questions that you have.
First, is there a motion to approve Resolution 16-056?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Shackleton. Are there questions for Ms. Christopher? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 10.3, which is Resolution 16-057, authorization to award a design contract for the Jennings Bay Wetland Restoration Project. Ms. Shovel.
Madam President, managers, tonight I am going to walk you through two resolutions. They're back to back, and they all revolve around the County Road 101 reconstruction project. So first I'm going to discuss just some background on the project so we understand how all the elements tie together, and then we'll go into seeking certain authorizations. So the Causeway project is shown here on the right with the right circle. That is proposed to have some floodplain impacts as part of that vegetated shoreline restoration project. So when the board ordered the project, we then said that we needed to mitigate for that floodplain impact. So the circle on the left is a parcel we identified in coordination with the city of Minnetrista to implement that floodplain mitigation. So just to quick recap, this is what the general concept is for the Wayzata Bay Causeway shoreline restoration. So the proposed work will fill a little bit between the 100-year floodplain. So we are required to estimated right now to around 1,000 cubic yards of floodplain mitigation. So this is the City of Minnetrista site. The district and City of Minnetrista entered in a cooperative agreement that says that we will investigate being able to implement the floodplain mitigation on their property. The district, we're working on trying to get that land transferred and fee to the district. There's some legislative things that have to happen for that. But regardless of that, the agreement allows us to construct and maintain regardless of that transfer happening. We also, in the agreement, will look at if the city needs it, doing some floodplain mitigation for some road projects that they had in 2014 as well. So here's a preliminary design concept. This is what was issued in the request for proposals. So the general concept is to excavate some areas that are shown in the purple and blue hashed, create that floodplain storage, plant our native trees and shrubs, and then restore the general understory of the vegetation. The estimated total cost for the project, including design and construction, is $200,000. Of that $200,000, around $34,000 was estimated for the design of it. So we put out a request for proposals. We received 3 proposals. They are shown here by Wank Associates, Respec, and SRF. District staff reviewed the proposals using the procedures identified in attachment 2 of your resolution, and staff all agreed that Respec put together the most comprehensive and well put together proposal. Some other things that noted about Respec is they just recently delivered the Long Lake Creek Wetland Lagoon Restoration Project, and they designed that on time and under budget, so that was another positive with them. And the team that we'll be working with again is, we've had a very good working relationship with them, and they also helped provide very good project management for the Long Lake Creek project. So tonight, staff is recommending that the design contract be awarded to Respect in the amount of $31,625. So that is resolution 16057. And with that, I can take any questions.
First, is there a motion to approve the resolution?
Move approval.
Is there a second? Manager Olson. Question, Manager Olson?
Did we ever get a decision on the part of the LMCD if we were violating their shoreline shape by putting in that outer stone barrier, changing the shoreline?
Manager Olson, managers, it seems initially they're saying it's not likely that it's will, but they are looking into it, and they're actually having a meeting on it tomorrow to discuss a little bit further. But,
Okay, but that wouldn't require us to do more of this kind of thing.
no, Manager Olson, riprap doesn't count, so that'd be below the 100 years, so.
Okay, thank you.
Manager List?
Just, I just need a refresher on, because we aren't choosing the lowest bid, and that, how do we what are the requirements to justify it? Not going with the lowest bidder?
Yeah, both managers, when we request proposals, we don't have to go with the lowest quote. So attachment 2 in your RBA lays out the procedures that staff have identified. So what goes into it is we weight 70-80% the proposal itself. So what staff did was we reviewed that, discussed them all, and then none of us had looked at the budgets. And then we factored in the budgets 20 to 30%. So since here all the budgets were relatively within the same ballpark, we were comfortable moving ahead with our initial preferred proposal. But generally, how that's been justified in the past is just that criteria within there, and saying, rather than when you're designing a project going for the low proposal might not be the best quality. So we're looking for different elements of that, then you have some general.
Mr. Welch, a question. Does this come under the professional contracts? There's a different rule of professional contracts, is that correct? In terms of bidding, public bidding?
Yeah, President White, managers, the requirements related to contracting are all, thank you, related to, as far as how they're conducted anyway, is related to capital projects. So for professional services, there aren't those requirements about the process that's conducted.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Madam
So
Clerk?
just on that, I just want to when, like, for example, when we do a variance, we have to have on the record, you know, a very clear rationale and reasoning, but in this case, we don't have to provide anything for the record? Is that
I-
correct?
Well,
I
we
think
have
it's in
a
there.
report.
If I'm-
It's in there?
I think it is. The consultant selection process, criteria.
Madam Chair, the criteria are listed, but the application of the criteria to the people who are applying, I couldn't find that.
Mr. Whisker?
President White, managers, it was past board policy to accept low proposals for professional services, and several years ago, we worked with the board to develop essentially a value-based selection process that the board vetted the criteria up front and essentially delegated to staff the framework that Tiffany outlined. And so the proposals are ranked on several parameters of quality for what we're looking for. So we read the proposals, there's a selection team that scores the proposals and evaluates whether or not they're going to be most qualified to deliver the project and if they hit all the elements that we're looking for. And then we open the cost tabs or the cost envelopes and then factor in the cost parameters. And with this project essentially being $1,500 above the low bid of Wenck, and the way that the proposal was written in our past experience on a recent project, that's why staff's recommending respec. So if you want to include the specific criteria and evaluations, that's something that we had dialogued on when we set this process up with the board, and with legal counsel have routinely opted to leave out and delegate at the staff level and to not make all of the specific scoring part of the public record.
Thank you. Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And then resolution 16-058, the companion piece.
Oh, I do have one question. I'm
Yes.
sorry. James, when you were evaluating those proposals,
You said you evaluated them before you looked at the number?
Correct.
Outstanding, thank you. So you don't let that
Yeah,
cloud
the costs and the proposals come in separately. So we review the quality of the proposal against quality criteria, and then we pick which one we think is the best. And sometimes they're very close, sometimes there's a big difference. And then you open the costs and see if the big difference was due to dollars and where those dollars are allocated. Some firms allocated many more hours towards construction observations. Some people put many more dollars into upfront design. And staff's job is to weigh where those dollars are and the quality of the proposal and past experience to bring your recommendation.
great, thank you.
Manager Miller?
Did you say, did they do the work on Long Lake?
Yep.
I think that's a testimony to the work. I mean, that was really a quality project.
Yeah,
I'm really pleased with the outcome there.
Yeah, Manager Miller, managers, as I said, that was one consideration. You know, obviously just had a good working contract with them, and they came in under budget on their actual contract, so that's something else that was a positive thing.
Manager Blixt?
My comments aren't about really necessarily to divorce myself from this particular wink and respect, and it's really more about process. You know, in my mind, just kind of trying to think through what if I were somebody from a firm or the public looking in at us and looking for why we're making the decision that we are. I didn't get the sense that I'd be able to follow it myself.
Well, the consultants do receive the selection methodology ahead of providing the
Yeah,
proposals.
but the rest of some other, if we had somebody who was, you know, really trying to go after us for anything, it wouldn't be there, is all I'm saying is. So
Maybe
it's-
legal counsel wants to address the how we score and how we bring that information to the board.
I'm glad to, Mr. Whisker. Well, Tiffany started her presentation with a very concise statement of the reasons staff supported that selection. And the public purposes doctrine always requires the Board of Managers to have support in the record for decisions it makes about funds that it spends. The degree, there's no bright line. It's a sort of good, better, best, and the factors that the managers consider when hiring professional services are in the manager's discretion. And a good record is always a good thing to support a decision of spending $30,000. And to the degree that the managers would like staff to fill in more thoughts about why that particular selection was made, that's a fine question to ask. But you know, Tiffany did start with that, you know, laying out staff's reasons as kind of headline items. So, and there's no, the difficulty with the challenge to that is that what standard did you not get over, or what, you know, so the managers have a lot of discretion in making that selection, past experience, et cetera.
Manager, no? Thank you.
Well, I think the best test is the most recent work they did for us. I mean,
Right.
it's just, you know,
That,
outstanding.
you know, and that's fine in this case,
Mhm.
but,
Yeah,
you know, I'm just saying in general.
I guess that's what we're sitting up here, we can
Yeah.
vote on each case.
Yeah.
I've lost my track. Have we voted on this
Yes,
already?
you did.
Yes.
Oh, and we're on to
Yes.
1605.
Post-decision, I asked the question.
All right, so the other piece of this bigger project, the board approved a design contract for the County Road 101 shoreline element back in April. And at that time, staff had noted that the plan was for the Grays Bay planting to occur this spring. And then throughout the spring and summer, Wank and Howerton would design the Wayzata Bayside, as that's a much more intensive design. And that would be built this fall. And the reasons for wanting to do the Grays Bay work this spring, there's two reasons, and I identified those in the RBA. One is that county is planning to install a railing along the cantilever sidewalk, which would then make any plantings or things that the district wants to do later on pretty difficult to navigate around. So would expect costs of that work to go up. Second reason is that the shoreline in its current state is ready to be planted, so why not take advantage of the growing season and get things going and moving forward. So bear with me, I'm just showing you what was provided to the contractors to provide quotes. So there's two sheets. This would be the southern half of the Grays Bay Causeway. So just the bottom of, or sorry, on the left-hand part of the sheet would be that little parking lot that's off of Grays Bay. So all of the areas in blue would be emergent plants, green areas would be live stakes or bare roots, and then the orange areas would be potted trees and shrubs. So again, this would be then just moving north, the same thing. There are a few areas that you see in red that says quote alternate. This is an area that the county is still doing a little bit active working with their bituminous trails. We're not quite sure what it's going to shake out. So we provided a quote alternate for that work just in case they did remove some more vegetation than anticipated, and if so, then we have a plan to replace that. So we broke the contract into two different ones, and the reason for that was the shoreline work is more emergent plantings where an upland company might not be interested in that, so we wanted to maybe get more competitive quotes in doing so. It just happens that the same contractor was interested in doing both and provided the low quote for both. So here is how they broke out. So the shoreline plantings contract is the emergent plantings and the live stake and bare roots. And wetland habitat restoration provided the low quote for that. And then for the Grays Bay upland planting, that would be potted trees and shrub, and then providing irrigation for those upland plantings since they're a little bit higher up and don't have as close of access to the water. And again, wetland habitat restorations provided the low quote for that. The third element in the RBA is a piece about installing a coconut bio-roll. So Hennepin County, when they were doing the cantilever trail that you see here on Grays Bay side, had installed a straw coconut or straw wattle. That's in currently need of being replaced, and looking at the district's long-term plans for the shoreline, we're looking for a little bit more longer stability in that. So staff suggested to the county if it was possible to have them install a coconut bio-roll, which will last around 3 to 5 years as the shoreline's establishing with the plantings we plan to do, and then have the district reimburse the cost difference. The county verbally agreed that they would do that, and in the resolution tonight, there is a whereas a recital for executing a not to exceed up to $15,500 for that. So why the preference is to do it this rather than the district's contractor is the county's existing erosion control contractor provided a much better quote than our contractors did. So ultimately it's saving us quite a few $1,000s to have them do it. And the agreement is that district staff will be on site making sure it's installed correctly into the place that we want it to. So there's 3 actions requested tonight, 2 of which are to award the planting contracts to wetland habitat restorations, and then the third is to authorize the board president to execute an agreement with Hennepin County to install a coconut bio-roll with a commitment of the district reimbursing the county. I did get word today that county staff may have determined that they don't need a new agreement or amending the existing agreement, in which case staff would just be coordinating with the county staff pursuant to the authorization and just following that not to exceed price point.
Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, is there a second?
Second.
Manager Shackleton, questions? Manager Olson?
Can you go back one step, please?
Yeah.
All right, when you said trees and shrubs in pots, where would they go on this picture?
Yeah, so this shoreline, not much. So it's literally all the way up here where the shoreline gets much steeper and there actually is.
But not up on that concrete path or anything?
Yeah, so the concrete flat, so this is where you're going to have the railing, the county's going to install a railing along
Right.
this whole.
But all of our stuff is off that and down into the ground?
Correct.
Okay. And why a potted anything? When you say potted trees and potted plants, why don't we just put in big all roots in the ground?
That's, Manager Olson, that's what we refer to as potted, so you're taking a tree or shrub that's grown in a pot and placing it
I
in.
had this vision of this because of erosion having some
Oh,
big
gotcha.
structure to hold
Like a
it to it.
container garden.
Yeah. And I thought, that's gotta be the world's most expensive.
They sell them in ours.
Okay, thank you. I'm feeling much better now.
Are there any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 10.5, Resolution 16059, authorization to contract with LHB and Tartology for 6 mile plan support. Ms. Brown.
Thank you, President White and managers. So I'm seeking authorization to contract with LHB and Hart-Howerton to provide 6 mile planning support. And I'll note that the approval I'm seeking right now is for phase 1 of their contract, which will be executed in 3 phases. I also note that I issued 2 small changes to the RBA that was included in your packet. The first being that I did not include a contingency on the total contract amount on my original RBA, so that has been added. So the contract amount will remain that $37,400, but there will also be a 10% contingency. And the other small edit was that Hart-Howerton will be a subcontractor, so the contract will be executed with LHB with Hart-Howerton as a subcontractor. So I'd like to just bring us back up to speed on the past actions that have been associated with this contract. So on March 17th, I presented to the PPC a revised planning framework for our 6 mile planning approach, which became sort of the basis of this RFQ and scope that you have in front of you today. On March 24th, the board authorized staff to issue that request for qualifications. We received 2 submittals, and both teams were brought in for interviews. The interviews were held on April 28th, and the interview panel unanimously selected LHB and Hart-Howerton. And then on May 26th, the board selected LHB and Hart-Howerton to provide that 6-mile plan support. And at that time, we worked with LHB and Hart-Howerton to begin to develop the scope of work and the contract. I wanted to just quickly run through our planning framework, as this was sort of the basis for that RFQ, and now has become the basis of the phases of the scope of work with LHB and Hart-Howerton. So on the top line of this timeline, we have our 4 committee meetings. So that's sort of the formal planning process where we'll be meeting with policymakers across the subwatershed and periodically checking in to vet some of the results of the project. So we've held our kickoff meeting at the beginning of May. The second meeting, we will be vetting some of the priorities that we identified through preliminary analysis and doing some goal-setting exercises with the whole committee. The third meeting will be vetting our draft master plans, and then the fourth meeting will be vetting an investment framework. So that's sort of the formal process, but then offline we'll be working a lot with city staff and different agency staff and stakeholders. We'll be working with our consultant teams, both WANC and LHB, and that's really where the bulk of the work happens. So within the first phase, that work product is developing some of the initial goal setting, document lists, getting all the data assembled, and getting the consultant up to speed so we can set a direction for this planning effort. In phase 2, that's when we'll be doing a lot of the mapping work. So we'll be developing a map vision. So for the whole subwatershed, we'll be developing priorities and a vision. But then we'll also get into some sub-map units that are grouped by different land use pressures, hydrology, different factors that sort of bind those areas together. And then we'll also be developing specific site plans for some of the major project opportunities that bubble out through the planning process. Those map unit plans will all be vetted back through the committee to make sure that they represent not only our interests in the watershed, but all of the agency interests in the watershed. And once we have those map visions in hand, we'll be working to develop the implementation and investment framework. So that's sort of the rough approach that serves as the basis of the scope that you have in front of you today. So as we've discussed both here,
Well, no, don't direct the staff to direct me. Did you want to ask a question at this point, Manager Olson?
You have more to say, so I'll let you finish.
Thank you. I'll call on you.
Thank you.
so as we have discussed both here in board meetings and in committee, the scope and the contracts will be executed in 3 phases. We're going the phased approach because it builds in a little more flexibility. The process it's really going to be a learning process. We'll be learning from our stakeholders. We'll be setting priorities based on what we hear in these committee meetings. So by going the phased route, we can sort of make adjustments through the process and make sure that we're giving clear direction to our contractors. And also that we're really treating this as an iterative learning process. So what you have in front of you today is phase 1. So phase 1 includes essentially an orientation with our contractors. So we'll be getting LHB and Hart-Howerton up to speed on some of the local priorities, the work that we've done so far. We'll be pulling WANC in to help with that process and also to make sure that we're developing a framework for those 2 consultants to work together. Within phase 1, we'll also be doing our baseline GIS analysis. So that involves assembling existing data from across the across our agencies as well as the data that we have internally, and developing a sort of baseline conditions map. We will also be going through some goal setting exercises. That will be done in one-on-one meetings with some of the agencies. It will be done with some subgroups. At this point, we're thinking we'll have sort of a northern 6-mile meeting and then a southern 6-mile meeting to do some smaller group goal setting. And then ultimately, phase 1 culminates in the second steering committee, where we'll be, again, vetting priorities and agreeing upon some of those goals of the 6-mile planning process. And then when we get into phase 2, so when we do execute contracts for phase 2, again, phase 2 will look at developing some of those master plans, unit plans, site-specific plans, and narratives. So that's when a lot of Hart-Howerton's services come into play with developing maps and graphics and compelling visuals. And through that, staff remains sort of responsible for maintaining routine contact with the agency staff, leading meetings, and making sure that the results of the mapping exercises are being vetted back through the different stakeholders. And then finally, phase 3 will be working with them to assemble that final report, as well as some of the investment framework. I wanted to provide a little bit of additional detail about the budget for this effort. So you can see that, well, this first phase of work, we're looking at about $37,000. You can see that the total budget right now is well above what we have allocated for 6-mile at this time. And we know that the department is running on a pretty tight budget, so we don't have a lot to sort of move over into the 6-mile planning effort. So a big reason that we're not executing phase 2 yet is that we need to figure out how to dial it back, how to reduce some of the budget there. But we've identified with both LHP and Hart-Howerton that we can't really do that until they're more up to speed on the scope of the whole effort. So we use phase 1 to not only get the work going, but to also get them to a place where they understand the scope more, and we can start to dial back that phase 2 and phase 3 budget. So when you do see these us executing phase 2 and phase 3, the budget isn't going to be what it is here. We're going to continue to work with them on adjusting that and dialing in the real numbers. This just kind of gives us a sense of what all the tasks are that will be involved and kind of how the workflow will be over time. And so with that, I can take any questions.
First, is there a motion to approve resolution
So moved.
16059? Is there a second? Thank you. Manager Olson.
Okay. I would like to make a small change recommendation.
Yes.
If you look at the title, it says 6-mile plan. I think it should read 6-Mile Creek - Halstead Bay plan. And we should start using that title throughout every bit of documentation, because it's all part of that same thing. And it involves both counties.
Is that an amendment to the motion? Because I'll second
Please
that.
make a motion to that effect.
I would, I'll make a
And
motion to
Manager
that effect.
Shackleton is seconding.
Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
So
Those in
this-
favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Manager Olson.
I will get used to writing it differently.
Manager Blixt.
So my question is about this phase 1 timeline, because we're approving the
Yeah,
budget, and it doesn't seem like it lines up here.
sure, Manager Blick. This is an out-of-date graphic. This was what was included in the RFQ, and we were using it as the basis of the planning timeline. I hadn't really revisited this diagram. It's one of those things, as soon as we come up with a chart, it becomes obsolete. I just wanted to refresh everyone on sort of the framework that we were using, although the timeline has shifted and adjusted as it does.
So where are we really? I mean,
So we are, well, it's early June. We have,
thank you, Bill.
so we are looking at bringing the consultant on now to get us working on that shared vision document. So at this stage, we're looking at kicking meeting 2 back about a month so that it's happening in July. I think a big shift happened in the timeline when we were doing interviews for the RFQ, and one of the teams wasn't available, so we pushed both interviews back a bit to give them equal time.
We're about a month, we're behind where we want it to be in terms of scheduling meeting 2. So we have some time to make up. When we discussed at a staff level, felt fairly confident, given the initial kickoff meeting and how engaged and energized people are, that phase 2 work is actually going to go a little bit quicker than we thought. And so we'll, I guess, be providing routine project updates and hopefully trying to recover that month.
Thank you. Other questions? All those in favor of the resolution 16059 as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Thank you.
Administrator's report. Administrator Erdahl.
Thank you, President White and managers. There's a few updates to run through, and then also kind of just a little bit of a preview for our joint committee meeting next week as well. The research and monitoring staff has been invited to do a couple presentations on the E-grade program, one at the 2016 NOLMS International Symposium and also at the U of M Water Resources Conference this fall. The research and monitoring staff is also presenting 3 AIS case studies at the biennial Upper Midwest Invasive Species Conference this fall. So they're getting the word out about some of our work. We already had some discussion. We met last week with the board investment task force looking at kind of alternative revenue sources with some staff internally. Also last week we met with staff from Redpath, our auditor, to just kind of do a quarterly check-in to see where we are, and it was actually quite timely. We got, I think, a little bit more clarity on some of the ways that the fund balances are accounted for in the audit that influences our understanding for budgeting processes too. So that was a real timely, good meeting for staff. Earlier this week, actually on Tuesday, we had staff representatives from Himbley Rapp who have been working on an initial review of results of their outreach analysis that they're doing. This was in preparation for next year's, for the 50th anniversary, and kind of looking at what we do on the lower versus the upper watershed and the impact of some of those things. So we'll still continue to get some more feedback, and staff are kind of in the process of digesting some of that information, but kind of the initial run of that information is going to be influential in terms of how we plan for communication education efforts going forward. And then also just next Thursday on June 16th, we'll have a joint committee of the board to discuss the 2017 budget development process. And we are going to be meeting early next week with President White to just kind of go over the plan. A lot of this is happening live as we speak. It's not like if we had it ready to do sooner, we would, but a lot of it will be kind of preparation up until Thursday afternoon perhaps. But we'll have kind of looking at the progress to date, looking at an executive summary of where we've come so far, and then looking at a high-level organizational overview, and then getting down into individual departments. And members of the staff from the different departments will be available to explain kind of their areas and some changes to the budgets that they're recommending, both as cost-saving measures primarily, and also how those changes impact kind of a strategic framework analysis that, although that's not completed yet or a finished product, that's already being used to kind of inform how we do our business and how we kind of make some of those budget adjustments as well. And then we'll be looking at kind of a defining list of policy topics that we're hoping to get direction from the board to help us better define the path forward to refine the budget to close the gap. And then we'll kind of look at the next steps and the schedule going forward from there too. So on Monday, when that meeting announcement gets distributed to you folks and the public, we'll also include with that the PowerPoint that was presented at the May 26th OPC meeting, and also a kind of a planning document, or kind of the project management schedule that was put together for the budget process this year too. So we'll include those on Monday when that gets distributed. And that is what I have for updates.
Thank you. Mr. Whisker?
I have one update I forgot to pass along to Lars, and that's that on June 21st, we've been asked by the city manager from Hopkins to facilitate a tour for city council and some of their staff of the Minnehaha Creek Preserve, the boardwalk, and creek works that we did just downstream, so they can get a sense of what work they'll be connecting into with their partnership on planning cold storage. So I'll be putting together a kind of a packet of information, and then we'll send that out. I don't know that I'll have to defer to President White in terms of open meeting and how we want to poll, how many managers want to attend that.
Okay. Manager Flixt?
I just had a question. Somebody was asking me about the status of the FEMA approval of the maps. Can anybody give me an update on that?
The map, there's the kind of there's an issue with the DNR maps versus the FEMA maps and the
You mean
floodplain.
The floodplain maps.
the maps that we've been waiting to be approved for
Yeah.
15 years?
Well, yes, exactly those.
Yeah.
Somebody was
That's-
inquiring,
that's the
and
update,
right.
I said, as far as I knew, they still had not been
They have
approved.
not been approved. I think what I'd prefer to do is send out a written communication that just bullets out a little bit of the history, recap for everybody. It's hard to do from memory, but they have published those maps for public review, and they've been reviewed. I don't know exactly where they are in the FEMA process. Almost every time we check in with the folks at FEMA, it's, well, it'll be within a 6-month window, and we've been hearing that for
Years.
many years.
Is FEMA part of the Homeland Security operator?
Yes and no.
I don't know the answer to that.
Busy on TSA stuff.
So I'll provide a written update to the board via email, and just exactly what that status is, so you can get that information out.
Thank you.
Okay, the question then, once I responded back, I said I was pretty sure that they still hadn't been approved.
Correct.
So, and I said it was an issue at the federal level, and perhaps, well, it was a city council office that was asking, and
Okay,
they said they offered to help.
okay.
So,
That's good to know. I think pretty much every city along Minnehaha Creek has sent letters to FEMA. The watershed district, I think, has sent 2 letters to FEMA. Edina sent a petition and a letter within the last year, so we can keep that pressure on and send those letters, but it hasn't, produced an end decision yet.
I know. It's like,
Cards and letters coming.
So I'll send out an update, and then if there's an opportunity to connect with the city and get some additional pressure, that would be great.
I think there is.
Okay.
Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.